This is what collapse looks like. Donald Trump is losing control of a war he started, and American troops are already dead. Missiles are lighting up the skies over Jerusalem. Iranian drones are striking U.S. bases. Hezbollah is opening a northern front from Lebanon. Explosions are rocking Iraq and Bahrain. Oil is surging. Markets are sliding. The region is sliding toward catastrophic escalation. And the man who triggered this? He looks confused, defensive, cornered. When asked to explain the objectives of this war, what are we even fighting for? Uranium? Regime change? Revenge? Trump refuses to answer. He pivots. He distracts. He points to a statue in his club like a man trying to change the subject at a funeral. Then comes the moment that defines this presidency. 3 American service members are killed in action. Trump shrugs. More will likely die, he says. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. A grotesque, cold-blooded statement from a commander-in-chief who dodged military service and now treats American sacrifice as inevitable collateral. No clarity, no strategy, no moral gravity, just magical thinking and ego. Only 27% of Americans support this attack. The Middle East is burning, the economy is shaking, and Trump is unraveling in plain sight. Now let's talk about the lie, because what we are watching right now is not just escalation abroad, it is exposure at home. For weeks, Donald Trump was insisting he was the peace through strength president. He was boasting that Iran was terrified. He was claiming that his pressure tactics had restored global stability. He was telling his base that only he could prevent world war chaos. That was the sales pitch. But let's look at what he actually said, and what he is saying now. When reporters asked him directly after landing, "Are you going to address the American people? Are you going to explain what is happening beyond social media posts?" He refused. He literally pivoted to admiring a statue. Let that sink in. This is the same man who constantly attacks presidents for not communicating clearly, who demands television coverage, who thrives on cameras. And suddenly, when American troops are dying and missiles are flying, he is dodging basic accountability. That is not strength. That is evasion. And then there's the objective question. At first, the justification was uranium enrichment. We cannot allow Iran to develop nuclear capability. That was the framing. Then suddenly the rhetoric shifts. Now we hear whispers of regime change. Then Lindsey Graham, one of the loudest cheerleaders for regime change, goes on television and says, actually, no, the goal isn't regime change. The goal is just to change the threat. Which is it? If this was a coherent strategy, the messaging would be unified. It would be disciplined. It would be precise. Instead, it looks like magical thinking layered over chaos. And let's not ignore the grotesque contradiction. Trump says we grieve the fallen. He says we honor their sacrifice. He reads the prepared lines about patriotism. Then, in the same breath, he says more will likely die. That's the way it is. That is not a commander projecting resolve. That is a man normalizing failure before the war has even properly escalated. He is pre-spinning casualties as inevitable. And while this is happening, while drones are hitting U.S. bases and ballistic missiles are striking Jerusalem, Trump is posting online about Lady Gaga's father endorsing him. You cannot make this up. This is what unraveling looks like. Distraction, deflection, and denial layered on top of a rapidly expanding conflict. The receipts are clear. He promised stability. We have regional escalation. He promised strength. We see confusion. He promised clarity. We get a statue tour and a shrug. This isn't leadership under pressure. This is a narrative collapsing in real time. Now let's go deeper, because the details here are not just alarming, they are devastating. Let's start with what is actually happening on the ground. I want you to picture this clearly. Iranian drone strikes have hit an ammunition warehouse at a U.S. base in Iraq. Secondary explosions are lighting up the sky. Fires are spreading across the facility. This isn't symbolic retaliation. This is operational escalation. And then look at Jerusalem. Ballistic missiles are impacting the city. You can see the aftermath. Buildings damaged, shockwaves rippling through neighborhoods. This is not controlled brinkmanship. This is widening conflict. Now let's move to Bahrain. There are confirmed reports of a large fire and explosion near a U.S. naval facility, home of the Navy's 5th Fleet. Multiple fires burning simultaneously. Strategic infrastructure under threat. Pause for a moment. This is what a regional war footprint looks like. Now, I'm going to read directly from Iran's foreign minister's statement, because this is critical. He says, and I'm quoting the essence of it, "They have had 2 decades to study U.S. military defeats to their immediate east and west. They have incorporated lessons accordingly. Bombings in their capital will not impact their ability to conduct war. Their decentralized mosaic defense enables them to decide when and how the war will end. Did you catch that? They are not projecting fear. They are projecting preparedness. That is not the language of a regime collapsing. That is the language of a state signaling endurance. Meanwhile, let's layer in another development. There are clashes erupting near the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Shiite protesters, security forces, Molotov cocktails being thrown. This is destabilization radiating outward. It's not contained. And then there is the strike in Novorossiysk, Russia. A massive explosion at a port facility critical to oil transport. Ukrainian forces appear to be escalating operations simultaneously. So now you have active war theaters in the Middle East and Eastern Europe heating up at the same time. You cannot ignore that convergence. Now let's talk economics, because wars don't exist in a vacuum. Brent crude spikes 13% to $82 per barrel. That's not minor volatility, that's shock pricing. Futures markets are tanking. The Dow, Nasdaq, S&P, all sliding hard. Investors are reacting to uncertainty, and uncertainty is exactly what this administration is projecting. Energy shock plus military escalation plus strategic ambiguity equals instability. And instability spreads fast. Now here's something even more grotesque. There was an elementary school for little girls reportedly struck in Tehran. A hospital appearing to have been hit. Civilian infrastructure under fire. Whether intentional or collateral, the optics are catastrophic. At the same time, Israeli and U.S. strikes are reported to have destroyed the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC command structure targeted directly. That is not symbolic. That is regime-level provocation. And what is the White House doing? We still do not have a clear articulation of objectives. No timeline. No defined victory condition. Just, we have very strong objectives. That's not strategy. That's branding language. Even the messaging toward the Iranian people is bizarre. Trump and Netanyahu are broadcasting into Iranian television, telling citizens to take back your country, as if Iranians are waiting for instructions from foreign leaders they largely distrust. It reeks of delusion, the kind of magical thinking that imagines geopolitical complexity dissolves under a slogan. And here's the most dangerous pattern of all. Escalation is happening faster than narrative control. That's when mistakes multiply. That's when miscalculations become irreversible. This is no longer a limited strike scenario. This is multi-front tension. Lebanon, Iraq, Bahrain, Israel, Iran, Russia, Ukraine. And while all of this is unfolding, the President of the United States is normalizing American casualties before the campaign has even clarified its purpose. That is not just poor messaging. That is strategic drift. And strategic drift in wartime is disastrous. Now, let's zoom out, because this isn't an isolated blunder. This is a pattern. And the pattern is collapse disguised as toughness. Think about the psychology on display here. Trump is ranting, deflecting, bragging about statues, posting about Lady Gaga's dad, while global markets are sliding and missiles are flying. That is not a man calmly steering a nation through crisis. That is someone spiraling, someone performing strength instead of exercising it. We've seen this before. When pressure mounts, he distracts. When facts corner him, he pivots. When accountability approaches, he lashes out or changes the subject. It's the same playbook we saw during COVID briefings, the same magical thinking, the same refusal to internalize consequences. And now, the stakes are exponentially higher. This is not a failed steak brand. This is not a bankrupt casino. This is not Trump University collapsing under fraud judgments. This is war. But the governing style hasn't changed. Look at the business record. Multiple bankruptcies, Trump casinos, Trump steaks, Trump airlines. Over-leveraged ego projects that implode under scrutiny. Each time the brand survives because someone else absorbs the cost. In geopolitics, there is no Chapter 11. If you miscalculate escalation with Iran, Hezbollah, and regional proxies simultaneously, the bill is paid in lives and global instability. And let's talk about messaging discipline, because healthy administrations coordinate narratives in wartime. Instead, we see fragmentation. One day it's about stopping uranium enrichment. The next, it's about regime change. Then a senior ally walks that back publicly. That's not strategic ambiguity. That's incoherence. Meanwhile, polling shows only 27% approval for the attack. 27%. In the middle of military escalation. That is political isolation. History shows that wars without broad domestic support become political sinkholes, and Trump knows it, which is why we're seeing distraction theatrics, statue tours, culture war bait, celebrity name drops. It's noise generation to avoid the core question. What is the exit strategy? There isn't one. And let's address the broader instability context. Russia's war in Ukraine is intensifying. A major strike hits a critical Russian port facility. Oil routes are under stress. Pakistan and Afghanistan tensions are rising. Multiple flashpoints are heating simultaneously. This isn't America first. This is the world destabilizing in parallel. And here's the deeper issue. Trump thrives on chaos in domestic politics. He weaponizes it. He floods the zone. But international conflict does not reward chaos. It punishes it. When adversaries sense inconsistency, they test boundaries. When messaging shifts daily, misinterpretation becomes deadly. When leadership appears impulsive, escalation risks multiply. And psychologically, the most disturbing pattern is the normalization of casualties. More will likely die. That framing lowers the emotional cost threshold. It prepares the public to accept rising death counts as inevitable background noise. That is not the language of a reluctant commander trying to prevent loss. That is the language of someone already insulating himself from blame. This is not a one-off misstatement. This is a worldview. A worldview where consequences are someone else's problem. A worldview where spectacle substitutes for substance. A worldview where strength is performed, not practiced. And when that worldview collides with real war, the result is disastrous. This is the difference between leadership and ego, between strategy and spectacle, between truth and gaslighting. Right now, the world is watching missiles fly, markets tremble, and alliances strain. And the President of the United States is normalizing American deaths as just the way it is. That is not resolve. That is moral erosion. Democracy cannot function on magical thinking. National security cannot operate on branding slogans. And American families should never hear their loved ones' sacrifices reduced to inevitability. We cannot allow distraction to replace accountability. We cannot allow chaos to be reframed as strength. And we cannot allow a shrinking political cabal to drag the country deeper into instability without demanding clarity, legality, and purpose. If you believe in facts over propaganda, in accountability over ego, and in democracy over strongman theatrics, make your voice part of this conversation. Hit subscribe. Help us grow this community. Support independent media that refuses to look away when power spirals. Because sunlight is accountability, and accountability is how democracies survive.